After the conversation in the study, it was unclear whether Leo had been moved by the talk or was simply terrified by the suggestion he move into Julian's room. But his schedule became as regimented as a machine's. He even followed Julian's instructions to set medication reminders on his phone, diligently adhering to the doctor's orders. The symptoms of his developing reproductive cavity eased considerably, and the fevers that had plagued him for days subsided. Only a subtle, lingering ache remained deep in his abdomen, a phantom sensation that made Leo's fists clench every time he remembered its origin. Julian, holding a file folder, casually asked if he had a lot of homework as he sorted through a thick stack of varied documents inside. Leo told him there was a ton, and that he'd try to get through half of it tonight. With Friday and the weekend, the 3-day workload was never light. As he logged into his online portal for class assignments, he glanced at the folder in Julian's hands. Perhaps it was a lingering side effect of so many hospital visits with his mother, but the papers Julian was handling looked disturbingly similar to medical reports. Before he could get a closer look, Julian closed the folder, set it aside, and mentioned in an offhand way that he had someone leave something on his bedside table for him to look at when he had a moment. Leo mumbled an affirmative, his curiosity piqued. After arranging his homework in a neat stack, he went back to his bedroom to investigate. There, next to his pillow, was a new book. To prevent any accidental snooping from the housekeeping staff, it was wrapped in plain, unmarked craft paper with no title on the cover. His curiosity growing, Leo picked it up and opened it without a second thought. A quick scan of the table of contents sent a hot flush of blood rushing to his face. It was an educational guide written exclusively for omegas. It read like an encyclopedia, exhaustive in its detail and shockingly comprehensive. A few chapter titles were marked with small check marks in dark blue ink. Early signs of an omega's first heat. Self-preservation during an omega heat cycle. Anatomical changes brought on by the heat cycle and precautions for a first heat. Julian had not only read this book, but he had also highlighted the important sections for him. Leo bit his lip until it turned pale. It felt as if a searing hot iron had been pressed against his chest, all his secret fears and shame hissing into steam. Just flipping through a few pages had made him blush so intensely that the heat spread down to the base of his neck. The truth was, he had never fully accepted the gender of his secondary differentiation. The abrupt shift from an alpha, a symbol of strength and leadership, to an omega, stereotypically perceived as delicate and fragile, left him with a persistent sense of humiliation and dislocation. It was manageable when left unmentioned. He could deceive himself, pretend there was no difference between being an omega and an alpha. But whenever he was forced to confront the reality, as if in a dream, he turned another page. A sharp X had been drawn in pen next to one of the chapter titles. Guidance and Shaping of the Omega Personality. For reasons he couldn't explain, Leo flipped to that marked section first. The content was mostly a collection of patronizing cliches. Things like an omega's personality traits are gentleness, meticulousness, and tranquility. Above the page number, 2 words were scrawled in sharp, elegant handwriting. Skip this. Leo turned the page again. In the same spot on the next page, 2 more words were written. Still looking. Felt like a hidden joke. The corners of Leo's mouth turned up in an involuntary smile. Besides those 2 pages, most of the other crossed-out chapters had the same kind of antiquated tone that made Leo want to tear the book to shreds. The realization that Julian, despite his crushing workload, had taken the time to screen this book for him, that he was being so responsible, Leo let out a soft breath. That feeling returned, the one where his heart seemed to curl into a small, tight ball behind his ribs, both sore and warm, a sensation that made the bridge of his nose tingle. He composed himself, pulled a cigarette from his pocket and lit it, taking a familiar drag from the filter. After smoking most of it down, he crushed the butt out and turned to the check-marked pages, forcing himself to read. It was half an hour later when Leo, having fortified himself mentally, returned to the study. At the large mahogany desk, Julian was engrossed in his work, utterly silent. It was Leo who felt on edge, terrified Julian would ask for his thoughts on the book. He stared intently at his calculus problems, yet his peripheral vision was fixed on Julian, his entire being attuned to the man's slightest movement. After a few minutes of this tense standoff, Leo's discomfort grew. He felt Julian's eyes on him. Was it just his imagination again? Leo stiffly turned his head, his gaze flickering nervously, and stole a quick glance at Julian. Julian was leaning back, chin propped on one hand, catching his gaze as if he had been waiting for it. He really had been staring. After a moment of silence, Leo jerked his gaze away, then, hesitating, risked another fleeting look. A teasing smile, like one you'd give a cat, played on Julian's lips. He feigned ignorance, asking why Leo wasn't focusing, wondering if there was something written on his face. Leo stammered that there wasn't, dropping his head to stare at his textbook. Julian then confirmed whether he had looked at the book. Leo's response was a vague, mumbled sound. He had tried, he truly had, and he'd managed a few pages. The problem was that the guide was far too detailed. It included not just explicit descriptions of omega-specific organs, but even cross-sectional diagrams and a clinical breakdown of the permanent bonding process. He had spent his formative years as an alpha. In middle school, his health classes had been segregated from the omegas. Unlike some of his peers, his mind had never been filled with adolescent fantasies. Consequently, the more he read, the more his face burned. Words like nodding, cavity, and lifelong mark were seared onto his retinas like brands. He figured pornography couldn't be much more explicit. He hadn't finished it. He felt a wave of guilt and shame for wasting Julian's thoughtful effort and had shoved the book into his nightstand drawer. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken things. Eager to change the subject, Leo betrayed his conscience with a small lie, claiming he had read it all. Julian gave a knowing little laugh, clearly seeing through the fib but choosing not to call him out. He could practically reconstruct the boy's entire emotional journey over the past 30 minutes. His young partner was so incredibly innocent, an innocence that made him ache. It seemed the practical lessons would have to wait until he could provide them himself. Julian decided to let it go and changed the subject, remarking that there was something he wanted to discuss. He reminded Leo that, technically, they had been married for over a month and that his mother was getting a bit anxious. Leo instantly tensed, his eyes wide and wary. That phrasing, how long they'd been married, Julian's mother being anxious, what could she possibly be pushing for? A jolt of pure panic shot through him. Before Julian could even finish his sentence, Leo's caution had morphed into wide-eyed horror. Julian continued, explaining that since they hadn't had a proper wedding, she wanted to host a small family dinner. Just their two families getting together, a gesture to satisfy the elders on both sides. As he spoke, he watched the play of emotions on Leo's face, and he had to suppress a laugh, asking with a mix of disbelief and amusement what on earth he had been thinking. Leo, afraid of giving himself away, denied thinking anything at all and quickly agreed that a family dinner was fine. After all this time, the only thing Julian had asked of him was to attend a meal with their families. He had no grounds to refuse. Leo's agreement was swift, but Julian's family was a sprawling clan. Even a small dinner would involve dozens of people, not to mention the relatives from his own mother's side of the family. The preparations would be meticulous and would take at least a couple of weeks. Julian considered this for a moment, then proposed that whenever he was free that weekend, he would take him to get a proper suit for the occasion. Leo thought about his own wardrobe, a collection of tracksuits, hoodies, and jeans, and knew none of it would be appropriate. He could only nod. The next day, a Saturday, Julian took him to a bespoke tailor shop. It was an old, venerable establishment, passed down from grandfather to grandson, founded back in 1913. It had weathered the turbulent decades and still occupied a quiet, historic corner of the city. The two-story brownstone that served as its storefront was over a century old, its entrance partially hidden behind the lush, leafy branches of a London plane tree. It was defiantly unpretentious, catering only to a familiar clientele with a sort of old-world aristocratic stubbornness. It was Leo's first time in a place like this. In his mind, tailor shops were relics of a bygone era, small places in busy neighborhoods that did alterations and fixed zippers. He never knew a place like this could exist. After the proprietor had taken his measurements, Leo sank into a plush velvet sofa and listened to the conversation beside him, half convinced he was in some sort of front for a criminal enterprise. A single yard of fabric cost thousands of dollars. The price of one suit would be enough to fund a month of his racing. He felt like he was sitting on hot coals, shifting uncomfortably, wanting to say something but afraid of embarrassing Julian in public. When the proprietor finally stepped away, Leo seized the opportunity, wringing his hands and whispering that it really wasn't necessary, that it was far too expensive. Julian stood before the sofa, hands casually in his pockets. He glanced down at him, his tone calm as he stated that he didn't find it expensive and that the fabric would suit him perfectly. He paused, then added with a note of apology that it had been over a month since their wedding and he hadn't thought to get him anything new, which was his own oversight. He said that if Leo were to refuse, he would feel as though Leo was blaming him for his neglect. The phrase "get you anything new" was so intimate it unconsciously bridged the distance between them. Leo, still young and unequipped for such subtleties, could only stammer a denial that he wasn't blaming him at all. Julian, sensing his attitude, pressed gently, asking if he was thinking he'd have to pay him back for a few new clothes. Leo remained silent, which was as good as an admission. He hated being indebted to anyone, and he couldn't possibly accept such an expensive gift, not with his feeling of being an outsider living on someone else's charity. Julian was quiet for a moment, careful not to wound his pride. He then remarked with a soft, teasing tone that he'd spent a good deal of time tutoring him last night, and should he have charged him a fee for that? Leo shook his head vigorously, insisting that wasn't what he meant. Julian explained that it was the same principle, gently pulling him into his own way of thinking. He reasoned that if two people living together after marriage had to account for every single expense, what was the difference between that and having a roommate? A business marriage without an emotional foundation was essentially that, wasn't it? Each living their own separate lives. Leo, dizzy from Julian's logic, was about to argue further when the proprietor returned with several large swatch books. Julian turned away, adopting an air of being deeply involved in the process, and began discussing styles and details in a low voice with the tailor. The cut of the lapel, a hidden pocket, the style of the vents, the choice of buttons. He even specified whether the jacket should button left over right or right over left. These were trivialities he usually left to his household manager. But this was Leo's first formal suit as an adult, and it held a special significance. He hadn't been there to shield Leo when he needed it most. And now he felt an overwhelming urge to cradle him in his palm, to pamper and protect him, to see to his every need. It was only because Leo was still so distant that he didn't dare do more. Even ordering a few suits required careful justification. Otherwise, Leo watched them for a while, unable to get a word in. He sat awkwardly on the sofa, masking his unease at being so meticulously cared for by repeatedly drinking and refilling his cup of tea. He had never experienced this kind of attention from a mature man. It was different from the maternal love his mother gave him, a missing piece in his upbringing. The warmth of it all seemed to bake him from the inside out, making him feel soft and pliable. Gradually, his insistence on keeping his distance from Julian began to feel less important. He even managed a quiet "whatever you think is best" when Julian asked for his opinion on a specific detail. Julian's expression didn't change as he replied that he would decide. Then, Leo mumbled his assent. Julian discreetly turned his head and glanced at him. His ears were bright red and looked incredibly soft, his features so docile it was heart-stopping. Before Leo could notice the stare, Julian turned back, a slight smile playing on his lips. Taking the rare opportunity to outfit Leo, Julian ordered a considerable amount, filling the old tailor's schedule for the next 3 months. He paid for an exp service for the suit needed for the family dinner, and it was ready within a few days. He brought Leo back for a fitting. Knowing the client was an Omega, the proprietor discreetly withdrew. The heavy, dark red velvet curtain of the dressing room was drawn. Julian stood alone outside, waiting. The sound of expensive fabric rustling came from within. After a moment of fumbling, Leo suddenly pushed the curtain aside. In his slender white hand, he held a tangled mess of black elastic straps, asking hesitantly what they were. Julian maintained a facade of dignified composure, glancing at the object from the corner of his eye and explaining that they were shirt stays, to keep his shirt from riding up. As someone who wore formal wear as if it were a second skin, he had no need for such things himself. But the tailor was thoughtful and had likely guessed from Leo's age that he was unaccustomed to suits. A young man is naturally more active, so he had included them. Leo, still looking confused, asked how to wear them. Julian turned his head, his gaze falling on the narrow, dark red gap in the curtain. Static from pulling off a hoodie had probably left Leo's dark hair endearingly messy. The collar of his shirt wasn't fully buttoned, and the scent of vanilla pheromones, concentrated in the small dressing room, wafted out through the opening, warm and increasingly sweet. Fearing his eyes would betray him, Julian resisted the urge to look down past the collar. He reached out, took hold of the curtain, and pulled the suggestive gap closed. He told him there was one for each leg, closing his eyes for a moment to maintain his composure. He instructed him to strap them to his upper thighs, then pull the fabric strips with the metal clips upward and fasten them to the bottom of his shirt. A soft noise of understanding came from behind the curtain. Leo's hand withdrew, and he began to awkwardly manage the shirt stays. The atmosphere outside the curtain grew thick. Julian fiddled with his cufflink, lost in thought. Leo was different from how he'd been a month ago. His guard was noticeably lower, probably because his good uncle persona was so convincing that Leo had fused him with labels like gentleman and noble, convinced he held no improper thoughts. This was both good and bad. It was good that they were closer, but he feared Leo would grow so accustomed to him in the role of a righteous guardian that he would one day be met with a gentle rejection. Once a sentiment akin to familial affection took root, it would be difficult to change. Just then, a soft snapping sound came from behind the curtain. It was the faint, intimate sound of elastic hitting skin. The noise reminded him of the night Leo came back from the police station, his ankle injured in a fight. He had knelt to examine the injury, and afraid Leo would put weight on it, he had impulsively gripped his calf, then found himself reluctant to let go. That was the only physical contact they'd had since their marriage, a moment he couldn't help but replay in his mind. The calf had been slender but not weak, lean and resilient like a gazelle's, pulsing with a vibrant, youthful energy. A leg like that, if cinched by an elastic band, no matter how firm the muscle, would inevitably be. He had to stop thinking about it. Fantasizing about things he couldn't act on was just needless torture. Julian mockingly shook his head, dispelling the colorful thoughts. The alpha gland at the back of his neck began to stir again. This susceptible period of his had already been delayed for over a month by the pheromone therapy. It was reaching its limit. That "you're a good person" line from Leo, he couldn't bear it, and he didn't want to anymore. Just as Julian was fighting to suppress the various too-soon thoughts in his mind, Leo announced he was done changing and pulled back the curtain. Julian hadn't chosen a somber black or gray fabric for him, fearing it would make him look stuffy and old. An 18-year-old boy was perfectly suited for a clear, lake blue. The vibrant color made his already fair skin seem almost luminous, making the darkness of his hair and the smooth red of his lips shockingly vivid. A vest of the same color defined his lean chest and a waist so narrow it made one want to reach out and span it with their hands. Julian's gaze darted away, as if to avoid lingering improperly, landing directly on the necktie Leo was holding. His voice was low as he said it looked good and told him to come over so he could tie it for him. Leo, unaccustomed to such clothes, awkwardly tugged at the hem of his jacket. He was raw, fresh, and clearer than the lake water itself as he walked toward him. Julian turned up his shirt collar. As he wrapped the tie around his neck, his fingertips accidentally brushed against the back of Leo's neck through the fabric. The skin there was soft and radiated an unnatural heat, likely where the gland was. It was just a casual touch, but Leo went rigid, his breath catching for a moment, like a kitten seized by the scruff of its neck by a larger cat. This was an omega stress response, something that didn't happen with just any alpha, only with one of high compatibility with whom a bond of trust had been established. It was a biological mechanism likely to facilitate an alpha's actions. Realizing this, a flicker of the primal alpha ruthlessness inside him surfaced. He finished tying the knot, smoothed down Leo's collar, and let the knuckles of his fingers brush against the back of his neck again, deliberately this time. As expected, Leo froze once more, his eyes wide. A little kitten. Julian smirked inwardly. A gentle brush on the neck and he was already stunned. What if? Julian wiped the smile from his face and calmly told him to go look in the mirror. Leo, dazed and confused, didn't understand what had just happened. He assumed Julian hadn't noticed his two strange reactions, so he composed himself and walked over to the mirror. An Omega who knew nothing was so easy to bully. Julian, who had just indulged in a little bullying of his young gentleman, felt a flicker of concern. After Leo had tried on the suit, Julian also picked out a few accessories for him, patiently instructing him on their use. A gentleman should always carry a pocket square. The Astaire was more casual, while the presidential was better suited for formal business. Silk knot cufflinks were inappropriate for evening events, but chain-link ones were sufficiently elegant. Black lace-up Oxfords were suitable for nearly any formal occasion in life. Julian flipped up the left lapel of Leo's jacket, pointed to a small loop underneath, and plucked a single rose from a nearby vase. He threaded the delicate stem through the buttonhole, hooking the end into the loop, explaining that it could be used to secure a flower. His tone was gentle and measured. Though he was speaking of things Leo didn't understand, he didn't sound arrogant or showy, merely a man of impeccable taste guiding a raw youth into the world of men. Leo looked down at his reflection in the corner of the mirror, his expression cool, but his ears were perked up, listening intently, his clear eyes shimmering slightly. By the time Julian finished, Leo looked up, and his gaze held a hint of barely concealed admiration. It was his first suit, and Leo thought it was perfect in every way, yet Julian still found a few minor imperfections for the tailor to adjust. A few days later, when they returned to pick it up, even Julian could find no fault. When the weekend arrived, Leo wore it directly to the family dinner at the old estate. The family estate was located on the outskirts of the city. After handing over the reins of the company to his son, Julian's father had retired here with his wife to enjoy life. The estate boasted a private equestrian center, hot springs, and a golf course. To ensure the quality and freshness of their food, a portion of the land had been designated as a small farm and orchard, managed year-round by experienced farmers, while drones constantly monitored the environmental conditions from above. Nearly 100 guests were expected for this dinner. When Julian and Leo arrived, it was only 2 in the afternoon, still hours before the evening meal. The early summer sun was warm, the breeze gentle. Julian's mother, Eleanor, had instructed the staff to set up an outdoor afternoon tea for the guests by the lake. The water shimmered like gold foil, and the lawn was a deep, rich green. Long tables covered in crisp white linens and adorned with floral garlands stretched along the curve of the lake, a setup grand enough for a wedding. It was utterly over the top. Leo had only seen scenes like this in melodramatic television shows about wealthy families. His concept of a family dinner involved a few large, festive round tables in a restaurant. Seeing the arrangement from a distance, he grew so tense his expression became rigid, and he walked several steps with his left arm and leg moving in unison without even noticing. He thought it was just supposed to be afternoon tea. This was afternoon tea? Julian noticed Leo's dazed expression and stopped walking, laughing self-deprecatingly. He joked that, compared to his father, a decadent capitalist, he was just a working stiff barely getting by, constantly exploited by the old man. He paused, then teased, asking if Leo was going to look down on him for it. The comment was absurdly privileged, but Julian's expression was so serious. In reality, Julian's work schedule was grueling. Unlike the CEOs in soap operas who seemed to do nothing but pursue romance, he often worked late into the night and was constantly attending banquets and social engagements. He frequently went to bed later than Leo, a high school student, and was always up early. His lifestyle was indeed a world away from his parents' leisurely retirement. In corporate jargon, he was living a life beyond the 9-to-5 grind, closer to 24/7. Even though it was for his own family's business, Leo couldn't help but think of news stories about young tech entrepreneurs going bald from stress or dying from overwork. He quickly glanced at the top of Julian's head. His hair was remarkably thick, and with a physique like his, he obviously worked out regularly, so his heart was probably healthy. Julian's self-pitying act had sent Leo's mind racing, distracting him from his anxiety. He looked down at the lush grass beneath his feet, pursed his lips, and said that in the future, when he was able, he would work hard to help share the burden so he wouldn't have to be so tired. Coming from a high school student, the promise sounded a bit hollow, but Leo's earnest expression made Julian pause. A playful glint appeared in his eyes. He asked if he was feeling less nervous now. His goal achieved, he gestured to another part of the lawn where a few of his elders were gathered, explaining that he would introduce them and all Leo had to do was say hello. He added with a gentle, smiling tone that he would handle the rest of the conversation. Leo's only job was to nod and smile. He asked if that arrangement was acceptable. Leo nodded eagerly, relieved. Julian commented that the nodding was good, then leaned down slightly, tilting his head to look at the boy's cool, reserved face and teased, asking to see the smile. Leo was taken aback. The icy mask on his face cracked, and a shy smile touched his lips. His composure regained, he walked beside Julian toward the lake. Eleanor was having tea with several senior family members. Seeing them arrive, she rose gracefully and took Leo's arm with an elegant yet affectionate gesture, leading him to sit beside her. There weren't many people at the table, and Leo followed Julian's lead, greeting each one in turn. After the pleasantries, Eleanor immediately began chatting animatedly with Leo. She was impeccably maintained and didn't look her age at all. Her voice was soft and melodious as she playfully complained that Julian had told her Leo was shy and overwhelmed with schoolwork, using it as an excuse to keep him away from the estate. She declared that he was just being petty and possessive, unwilling to share his husband with anyone. Julian just smiled, letting his mother happily scold him as if admitting guilt, and poured a cup of tea for Leo. Eleanor continued, saying that alphas are always like that when they're newly married, irrationally jealous, wanting to lock their spouses away in a vault. She reminisced about when she and his father had first married. How he would stand guard at the door like a sentinel if she wanted to go shopping with friends, forcing her to get angry with him. As she feigned annoyance, Julian's father offered a placating smile, and the other family members at the table chuckled politely. The family was large and prosperous. Although Julian was his father's only son, he had numerous uncles and cousins. They were all aware of his worsening susceptible period disorder and the near impossibility of him finding a compatible omega to produce an heir. They had assumed his hold on power was temporary and that the family assets would eventually be divided. They were content with this state of affairs. Then, out of nowhere, Leo's family had produced a 100% compatible omega. Suddenly, not only was there a cure for Julian's condition, but there was also hope for a successor. Naturally, they felt no warmth toward this omega. Consequently, vicious rumors had spread through the family. They whispered that the omega was of low birth, an illegitimate child who hadn't even been formally acknowledged by his family, and was thus unfit to bear an heir for them. They claimed Julian's parents looked down on him too, seeing him merely as a living medicine cabinet. Others said the couple had no affection for each other, that a high compatibility rating meant nothing, and the chances of conception were low. Some even whispered that the compatibility results were fabricated, that the numbers weren't that high, and Eleanor was just putting on a brave face for the family, swallowing her pride. Eleanor, a woman with a proud spirit who had been cherished by her husband her entire life, could not stand such insults. The gossip had left her furious. She had been bottling it up for some time and was now seizing the opportunity to vent, determined to put on a show of intimacy and warmth. Besides, the boy was handsome and quiet, genuinely likable. So while it was partly an act, it was at least 70 or 80% sincere. Eleanor playfully draped her arm around Leo's shoulders, deliberately trying to provoke her son, saying that the more he tried to hide him, the more she wanted to see him, and that this time he couldn't stop her. She turned to Leo, her voice softening, and insisted that he must stay for a few days to keep her company. Overwhelmed by Eleanor's enthusiastic welcome and unfamiliar with such social customs, Leo honestly nodded and agreed. Such a good boy. Eleanor's heart went out to him, and her fondness grew. Julian smiled and shook his head, explaining that Leo had school the next day and that staying here would mean waking up half an hour earlier. Not to mention he still had a lot of weekend homework. Eleanor interrupted, telling Leo not to listen to him, and then lectured her son on proper alpha etiquette, asking why he was nagging him about homework when he was supposed to be relaxing. She instructed him to take Leo for a walk later, maybe go horseback riding or play some golf, declaring that his husband's happiness was his responsibility and duty. Julian smiled warmly and raised his hands in surrender, agreeing without issue, saying he would take him as soon as he finished grading his homework. Eleanor was exasperated. while her husband roared with laughter beside her. The atmosphere at the table gradually warmed up. Eleanor's performance was a clear message to all the relatives. She was pleased with this marriage and with Leo. Their family of 4 was harmonious, and there was no room for outside gossip. The uncles and aunts at the table were no fools. They wouldn't look for trouble. They all put on friendly smiles and struck up conversations with Leo, showering him with praise. Just as planned, Julian deftly handled all the responses for Leo. It was only when Eleanor gently chided him for monopolizing the conversation and bullying the boy that Julian offered a soft defense. Explaining that his young husband had a quiet personality and didn't like to talk much, so he spoke on his behalf. He then turned to Leo, his expression a mixture of feigned spousal fear and genuine affection, and sighed that he would never dare to bully him. The tone was so intimate that Leo looked up in alarm, his eyes meeting a pair of dark, deep-set ones, full of laughter and a tenderness that was heart-stopping. His heart seemed to leap into his throat. His fingers tightened, nearly crushing the teacup in his hand, and he quickly lowered his gaze, bewildered and flustered. He had no idea where Julian had learned to act like this. Probably from business negotiations. Eleanor's eyes curved into crescents as she studied the two of them with great interest. Suddenly, as if she had perceived something new, the smile on her lips widened. Just then, Leo's biological father, Mr. Wallace, arrived at the table with his wife and young son, exchanging pleasantries with the other family members. Wallace's son was named Riley, Leo's half-brother. It seemed he had inherited the worst traits from both his parents. He was dull and overweight, looking like an overcooked sausage, utterly unlikable at first glance. Julian's gaze swept over the 3 of them, his expression cool. He gave a slight, dismissive nod of acknowledgement and then, citing the heavy workload before midterms, excused himself and Leo from the table. He led Leo away from the crowd, down a quiet garden path, and into the main house. They went up to a guest room that had been prepared on the 2nd floor. Standing at the door, he informed Leo that his study materials had been brought over and that he wouldn't be needed for social obligations that afternoon, so he could focus on his work. He added that he should bring the completed assignments to him for review. Leo mumbled an affirmative, turning his face away with a somewhat evasive expression. Julian studied him for a moment, understood, and offered an apologetic smile. He explained that he couldn't act too distant in front of the elders, so he had behaved a bit more affectionately. Leo's ears instantly turned hot, and he said he understood, then tried to dismiss him, saying he had to get to his homework and that Julian should go attend to his own business. He reached out to close the door. The door was halfway shut when a forearm firmly blocked it. Julian's smile vanished, and his voice softened as he asked gently if he was angry with him. At first glance, it seemed like a sincere apology for his intimate behavior at the tea party, the picture of propriety. But on closer inspection, his eyes held a deep, affectionate tenderness, as if he knew he had done nothing wrong but was willing to feign guilt simply to indulge his young partner. Unbeknownst to Leo, he was being gently coaxed. He was secretly crossing a line. Leo couldn't handle it and quickly denied being angry. He couldn't pinpoint the source of his flustered feeling, but it certainly wasn't anger. Julian pressed for confirmation, asking if he was sure. They were standing so close that Leo could almost feel the velvety vibration of Julian's throat as he spoke. A tingling sensation spread through him. He scratched at his unbearably itchy ear, feeling an inexplicable agitation, and insisted that he was fine and that Julian should hurry and get back to his work. Julian agreed he would, then paused. He couldn't resist. He fixed his gaze on Leo's bright red ear. It was that ear's fault, really, so red it made his intentions turn wicked. He kept his hand on the door, his voice low as he asked if he was hungry, noting that dinner might be late. He offered to have some snacks sent up, asking if he preferred sweet or savory. The words were perfectly normal, but whether it was his gentle tone or something else, they sounded as seductive as a lover's whisper. Leo was completely bewildered, unsure what was happening, only aware that the voice was making his ears tingle. He stammered a response, saying sweet would be fine, then changing his mind to savory, then that anything was fine, he wasn't picky. The alpha gland at the back of his neck was now burning with activity. This only encouraged Julian further, and he continued his teasing with a smile, asking what he wanted to drink, tea or juice. Leo replied that anything was fine. Julian asked if the Darjeeling tea from earlier was to his liking. Leo agreed it was, then pleaded that he had a lot of homework and needed to get started. Seeing that Leo was on the verge of a breakdown, Julian finally relented. He turned to leave, closing the door behind him. The room fell silent. Leo sat down at the desk, quickly spread out his papers, and began writing furiously, as if fleeing from something. He rubbed his ears from time to time, the tip of his pen scratching against the paper. After working through a few problems, Leo's mind gradually settled, and his focus returned to his work. Thanks to Julian's tutoring over the past few weeks, he had made significant progress. These were review packets for the recent material, so there were only a few questions that gave him trouble. Midterm exams were just a few days away. He couldn't say for sure what his rank would be, but his score would definitely be a significant improvement. After finishing the 2 packets, Leo finally felt some of the old rhythm of studying he had lost since dropping out of school. He was in a rare good mood. He shook out his sore hand, planning to take a short break before starting on his English homework. Just then, he heard a few meows from outside the door. Leo looked up, opened the door, and peered curiously down the hallway. There, a chubby Napoleon cat was huddled in a corner, its sleek, satin-like fur slightly puffed up in anger. Leo's half-brother, Riley, was aiming a toy gun at it, firing rubber pellets. Riley was 8 years old and had inherited his father's malicious and selfish nature. He was thoroughly spoiled by his mother, behaving without a shred of the decorum expected of someone from a prominent family. At the tea party earlier, with his parents watching, he had managed to feign good behavior. But as soon as he was out of their sight, his true nature emerged. Leo hadn't spoken to him much, not that he wanted to. The slightest displeasure would send the boy into a squealing fit like a scalded piglet. Leo glanced at Riley without a word, quietly scooped up the cat, and gently rubbed the spot where it had been hit. He turned to go back to his room. The little cat in his arms was quite the charmer. Sensing Leo's kindness, it started writhing and meowing, as if tattling on its tormentor. Leo's lips curved into a small smile as he ignored Riley's noisy shouts from behind him. The boy was mimicking the sound of gunfire. Bang, bang, bang. A rubber pellet struck the back of Leo's head. The impact against his occipital bone was sharp and painful, like being sucker-punched by a small child with all his might. His vision momentarily went black. The force of these toy guns was surprisingly strong. If aimed at the eyes, they could cause blindness. Riley let out a high-pitched, excited laugh, jumping up and down. His chubby face was flushed in uneven patches, his small eyes lost in the flesh. He looked even more like a pig. Leo took a deep breath, not daring to turn around. He could imagine Riley's repulsive expression and feared he wouldn't be able to control the urge to use violence against an 8-year-old. But trying to reason with a little monster like that would be a waste of breath. Besides, he still needed the medical payments from Wallace. He couldn't afford to be impulsive. Ignoring him was the only option. He started back toward his room when a sharp insult cut through the air behind him. "Bastard." The child's voice was clear but laced with a natural venom and a sick excitement. Seeing that Leo didn't react, just kept walking away, Riley grew bolder, chanting in a sing-song voice, "Illegitimate child. Low class." He was as excited as a novice scientist who had stolen some dangerous chemicals and was now pouring them into a cage, eager to observe the test subject's reaction. An 8-year-old could be naive, but in some ways they could be terrifyingly cunning. He knew this cheap older brother couldn't afford to cross him. Bullying him had no consequences. Leo closed his eyes, pretending not to hear. When Riley saw that he remained unmoved, not even glancing his way, he grew frustrated and pulled out his trump card. Shouting, "My mom says your mom is a..." Those few words made Leo's ears ring. His mother was his weakness, the one thing he would not allow anyone to trample on, no matter how much he had to endure. But just then, Riley's taunts were cut short. Julian's voice, calm and steady, devoid of any discernible emotion, came from behind him. "Whose child are you?" Leo froze and turned around. Julian was standing next to Riley, one hand in his pocket. His other hand, with its long fingers, rested on Riley's round head, gently but firmly turning the boy to face him, even tilting his head from side to side. The gesture wasn't one of acknowledging a person with dignity, but more like inspecting a spherical art piece for a signature. Riley unleashed his signature move, a piercing shriek. Julian nodded with an air of understanding and released him. Riley, now wailing for his parents, ran off to tattle. Leo watched him go, the boiling anger in his blood cooling as reason returned. He wasn't naturally aggressive. The times he had fought before were a survival habit learned from growing up in the slums. People there preyed on the weak. If he didn't fight back and establish his dominance, he and his mother would never have lived in peace. But Riley couldn't truly affect him. They would rarely see each other again, and the provocation had been interrupted. It wasn't worth it. Letting it go was the best option. He didn't have the luxury of holding a grudge over a few insults. He addressed Julian, standing tall like a resilient bamboo shoot, his tone calm, asking if it was time for dinner. Julian, tall and imposing, stood quietly in the softly lit hallway, studying him. Leo's fingers, resting on the cat's ears, were trembling. He was faking his composure, seeking protection and comfort from one's alpha, even a nominal one whining, complaining. These were things any other Omega would consider their right. But for Leo, they were unimaginable. When faced with difficulties, he always chose to be strong, or at least pretend to be. After a moment of silence, Julian smiled gently and said he had just come up to check on him. That dinner would be a little while longer, and suggested he go back to his room and play with the cat for a bit. Leo let out a sigh of relief and nodded, quickly returning to his room with the affectionate cat in his arms. His hands were covered in cat hair now, making it hard to wipe his eyes. He turned his head and rubbed the corner of his eye against his shoulder, then buried his damp face in the cat's fluffy belly. The cat smelled faintly of pet shampoo, its fur silky and smooth, strangely comforting to inhale. After being kneaded by 4 soft little paws for a while, the knot of frustration in his chest began to loosen. And just then, Riley's pig-like squeals echoed up from the first floor. He must be getting scolded. Leo didn't pay it much mind. He was used to it. It wasn't necessarily because of him. A brat like that could get into trouble 100 times a day. But this time was different. Riley's screams stopped after just a few seconds, and then, a moment later, they turned into genuine sobs. a sound of such profound sorrow and heartbreak that it would put a professional mourner to shame. Riley was actually crying, not shrieking or yelling, but crying. Even someone as detached as Leo found it novel, almost unbelievable. He wanted to see it for himself. Afraid of scaring the cat, he placed it on the bed and followed the sound. He didn't have to go far. Just a few steps down the stairs, he saw a small sitting room on the first floor where a few people were gathered. Riley's chubby face was marked with two bright red, symmetrical handprints. Wallace's face was a mottled, ugly purple as he pointed at Riley and roared at him to cry again, daring him to keep crying. Julian sat calmly on the sofa, a picture of grace and composure. As if disgusted by the spittle flying from Riley's wails, he delicately dabbed at the front of his suit with a pocket square. After wiping it, he crumpled the expensive silk square and tossed it into a wastebasket with a disdainful air. Wallace's wife, who had put on a flawless face of makeup, had her look ruined by tears. Forgetting all sense of propriety, she threw herself at her husband, trying to pull down his raised hand, only to be shoved aside. Wallace turned his anger on her, loudly berating her for her poor parenting, as if putting on a show for an audience. The chaos escalated. The wife, unable to bear the humiliation, broke down completely, grabbed Riley, and stormed out, abandoning the dinner party entirely. After his wife and son left, Wallace humbly apologized to Julian, thumping his chest and promising to discipline the boy severely at home. He was terrified that his son's thoughtless words would cause a rift between the two families and jeopardize future business dealings. Julian's response was formal and distant, not addressing him as his father-in-law. He stated that Mr. Wallace had no need to apologize to him. The person he should be apologizing to was his husband. Wallace bowed and scraped, agreeing profusely. Julian then called out Leo's name, subtly glancing toward the staircase. The shadow that had been crouched there moments before had vanished like a little cat, clearly unwilling to interact with Wallace or accept his insincere apology. A faint smile touched Julian's lips. As if to ensure the little ears hiding somewhere nearby could hear, he changed his tone, raising his voice slightly. He remarked that Leo was magnanimous and wouldn't bother with such trivial matters, that he would probably forget all about it, so it fell to him as his husband to hold the grudge on his behalf. As his husband, Leo's foot slipped, and he nearly tumbled down the stairs. By the time Julian came upstairs to call him for dinner, Leo had been back in his room with the cat for some time. The commotion in the sitting room had been loud. You would have had to be deaf to miss it. But Leo didn't know how to bring it up. The experience of someone standing up for him, of someone disciplining another on his behalf, was so foreign that his heart felt like it was shrinking into a small, tight knot behind his ribs, hot and sore, almost melting him from the inside. Julian leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. After a moment of thought, he smoothly broke the silence, stating that he assumed Leo had heard everything. Leo's eyelids twitched as he mumbled an affirmative. Julian said in an understated tone that he had dealt with them downstairs, and then asked if the noise had disturbed his studying. Them clearly referring to the Wallace family. In terms of social standing, Wallace was technically Julian's peer, even a decade older. And by marriage, he was his father-in-law. To use the phrase dealt with was incredibly arrogant and disrespectful. But it was also incredibly satisfying. Leo suppressed a smile, defending the absolute righteousness of Julian's actions by saying that no, it hadn't disturbed his studying. He had been playing with the cat. Playing with the cat, Julian let out a low chuckle. Then, his smile faded, and he adopted a serious expression, remarking that a perfectly good family dinner had been ruined by his bad temper, that he had lost control in public and forgotten to show Mr. Wallace proper respect. He was delivering a self-criticism, but his tone held a hint of mockery, and his dark eyes glinted with a playful, conspiratorial look that he shared with Leo. He then asked, feigning concern, if Leo wasn't going to blame him for it. He was fishing for a bit of sweetness from his innocent young partner. He was asking for CR. Blame him? How could he possibly blame him? Leo rushed to deny it. The emotion swelling in his chest was almost overflowing, but he was afraid of revealing a gloating expression. So he tried to maintain a calm, objective tone as he commented that Riley did, in fact, need someone to discipline him. Perhaps because his susceptible period was approaching, the mask of a perfect gentleman was becoming harder to maintain. Julian smiled, his gaze dropping to Leo's thin, tightly closed lips. As he stared, he expertly pried for more compliments, verbally teasing that clumsy little tongue. He said that yes, he had disciplined him on his behalf. So what should he say to him? What was one supposed to say at a time like this? The obvious answer was thank you. Even a kindergartner would know that. It was a simple, appropriate response, but for some reason, Leo found himself feeling shy, his voice dropping as he said, Thank you, Julian." The room was silent for a few seconds. Julian hadn't gotten enough of his sweet reward. His self-control finally failed him. A small smile played on his lips as he adopted a steady, righteous tone and asked a completely shameless question. "Am I a good man, Leo?" 10 minutes later, as he and Julian arrived at the entrance to the main dining hall, the heat in Leo's cheeks had finally been cooled by the evening breeze. They were now a soft pink, no longer bright red. That question, "Am I a good man?" was so simple it shouldn't have required any thought, yet it had thrown him completely off balance. It took him a long, agonizing moment before he, red-faced, was finally coaxed by Julian into admitting that yes, he was. The entire walk over, his palms had been slick with sweat, clenched tightly in his fists. He had the strange, unsettling feeling of having been subtly propositioned, a mixture of shame and confusion. But the question itself wasn't vulgar, and the tone had been normal. He wasn't offended by it, just embarrassed. If someone had actually made a crude joke, his reaction would have been anger, not this. So that wasn't it. What was he even thinking? Of course that wasn't it. Julian had stood up for him, defended him so fiercely, and had even gently rubbed the back of his head for a moment. And in return, he was harboring these wild suspicions. Did he have any conscience at all? Leo shook his head, ashamed, and forcefully pushed the thoughts that tarnished Julian's noble character from his mind. He took his seat next to Julian at the long dining table. The atmosphere of the dinner party hadn't been spoiled by the abrupt departure of Wallace's wife and son. Wallace, knowing he was in the wrong, did his best to act as if nothing had happened. When asked, he simply said his young son wasn't feeling well and his wife had taken him home to rest. Perhaps because of the season, the menu was heavy on seafood, with ingredients so expensive they bordered on extravagant. The presentation was dazzling. 8 out of the 10 dishes were things Leo couldn't name, and he had no idea where to even begin with his chopsticks. To make matters worse, he was the guest of honor at this dinner, the center of attention with eyes constantly on him. He was terrified of exposing his ignorance and embarrassing both himself and Julian. So he didn't touch his chopsticks at all, instead lifting his glass and taking a slow, small sip of juice. After putting the glass down, he paused, about to take another sip, when Julian intercepted a pair of clean chopsticks from a server and placed a piece of golden brown pan-seared crab cake onto his plate. It was a perfect bite-sized portion. Leaning in, he whispered that he wasn't sure if the chef's cooking would be to his taste, and suggested he try it first. Leo, feeling as though he'd been rescued, picked up the piece of crab cake and nodded. Julian then nonchalantly picked up a slice of marbled raw tuna, dipped the tip of his chopsticks into the wasabi, and then gently touched the other side of the fish to the soy sauce dish next to Leo's hand. His movements were slow and deliberate, allowing Leo to clearly see the proper way to eat it. Leo paused, realizing what he was doing. His eyes shimmered, as if coated in a thin layer of water. He wasn't upset that Julian had seen his predicament. He just felt a sense of enveloping warmth. Throughout the entire dinner, Julian was impeccably attentive, constantly setting aside his own status to serve his new young husband, refilling his juice and deflecting offers of alcohol. He was so thorough he might as well have been dipping the food in sauce for him. Every action radiated a sense of deep care and affection, a level of devotion that surpassed even that of his doting father. It was less protectiveness and more pure indulgence. The various relatives, from both the main and branch families, watched and gradually came to a clear understanding. Regardless of the business interests tied to this marriage, Leo was now a figure in the family that no one could afford to offend. One by one, they came over, using toasts as an excuse to get acquainted with Leo, their conversation warm and friendly. And nearly every glass of wine offered to Leo was drunk by Julian instead. Midway through the dinner, Leo couldn't take it anymore. He gently tugged on Julian's sleeve under the tablecloth. Julian turned his head slightly. Leo pointed to his own glass and insisted that he didn't need him to block the drinks for him, that he could handle it. Unseen by Julian, he had managed to get himself a glass of beer. Golden bubbles danced at the rim, releasing the scent of malt. Julian glanced at him, a slight smile on his lips, and repeated softly, "You can handle it?" His voice, soaked in alcohol, had a husky, tipsy quality that grated sensually against the ear, even more so than usual. The words were uttered so lightly they bordered on flirtatious. It was almost like a come on. This only confirmed Leo's suspicion that Julian was quite drunk. He composed himself and said that yes, he could, and that he was worried he would get drunk and have a headache tomorrow. When Julian didn't respond, he frowned, a hint of urgency in his voice as he raised it slightly, declaring that his tolerance for alcohol was excellent. Speaking of being drunk, Julian had never truly been drunk. The constitution of a top-tier alpha wasn't for show. Alcohol only served to excite his nervous system. He didn't need an 18-year-old Omega to drink for him, nor should he be encouraging Leo to drink. He had only been a legal adult for a few months and should stay away from things like cigarettes and alcohol. Leo hadn't even finished his weekend homework. After dinner, he still had another set of practice tests to complete. Furthermore, he remembered that the Leo of the past had a very low tolerance for alcohol. 3 or 4 beers would be enough to leave him completely incoherent. Yet here he was, brimming with confidence, convinced of his own formidable capacity. Julian's brow furrowed slowly. The only explanation was that Leo's constitution had changed after his differentiation into an Omega, that his tolerance for alcohol had drastically decreased, but he himself was unaware of it. He remembered what Leo had been like when drunk in the past, unbelievably docile, like a soft little drunken shrimp. If someone were to pick him up, peel off his shell, and lick every inch of the sweet, tender flesh inside, taking full advantage of him, he probably wouldn't even know how to resist. Julian's pupils darkened. The long-suppressed desire, thick and hot as molten lava, began to seep out, fueled by the alcohol and the stirring of his alpha gland. It boiled and seared him. Even the veins in his arms seemed to throb with excitement. Leo, oblivious to the danger, looked at him eagerly, his eyes clear and innocent, wanting only to share his burden. The boy's heart was so pure, so precious. As if making a decision, A slow smile spread across Julian's lips. His voice was husky as he said, "Just this once. Never again." Leo gripped his glass, straightened his back, and stood up to take a drink on Julian's behalf. He looked incredibly cool as he drank, his expression serious and determined, without any unnecessary flourish. He just tensed his small face, waited for the toasting guests to finish their pleasantries, and then downed the glass in one go. Julian toyed with his empty wine glass, his eyes fixed on Leo, watching the sharp, small line of his Adam's apple bob up and down. His gaze was heavy. 1 glass, 2 glasses, 3. As the server approached to pour Leo a 4th, Julian suddenly covered the glass with his hand, waving the server away. He then looked at Leo with a teasing expression and remarked that the alcohol seemed to have hit him rather quickly. Leo blinked hard, his eyes widening then squinting, trying to make sense of the overlapping lights. He rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand. Julian chuckled and gently blocked his hand with 2 fingers, telling him not to rub, that his hands were dirty. He questioned if he had missed elementary school health class, even if he'd missed the one in middle school. Leo turned his head, his cheeks as pink as a ripe peach, and tried to defend himself, stammering that the alcohol must have been quite strong. Julian just laughed, dryly informing him that he had been pouring him a 6% light beer, and asked if he really thought that was strong. Leo froze, deflated. The party was winding down and had become quite boisterous. Julian's voice was so low that no one else could hear what he was saying. They only saw his gentle, teasing expression as he whispered into Leo's bright red ear and assumed the newlyweds were flirting. Little did they know that Julian was ruthlessly schooling the boy on this joyous occasion. He explained that one's body changes after differentiating into an omega. A high tolerance for alcohol before could become a low one after. He pointed out that while he could handle 3 glasses of this light beer, if it had been something stronger, he might already be unconscious. He then asked if he would ever dare to drink like that outside again. Leo, his head bowed in shame, mumbled that he understood and that he wouldn't dare to again. His clear, youthful voice was now soft as down, softened by the alcohol. It was just like before. A little bit of alcohol and he became unbelievably obedient. Julian pressed further, asking if he would refuse a drink from anyone else besides him. Leo mumbled his agreement. Julian let out a low laugh. At least one major safety risk had been neutralized. The dinner ended, and guests began to leave. Normally, as the main figures of the event, Julian and Leo should have stayed with his parents to see the guests off, or perhaps even stayed the night. But in reality, before more than a few groups of guests had departed, Julian was already leading Leo to the car. Before leaving, he had whispered something to his mother. Her smile suddenly became so wide she couldn't contain it, and she dropped all mention of the young couple staying over, happily shooing them away. In the car, Julian showed a rare sign of fatigue. He leaned his head back, eyes closed in feigned rest, his handsome brow furrowed. A blue vein pulsed at his temple, a clear sign of discomfort. The sharp scent of tequila began to fill the car, stronger and more intense than usual. Leo, long accustomed to Julian's pheromones, didn't immediately notice the change. He was worried Julian was feeling sick from the alcohol and stammered his concern, asking if they should pull over so he could get some fresh air. Julian, eyes still closed, managed a small smile and told him he wasn't drunk. Leo, unconvinced, was about to argue when Julian quietly added, "It's my susceptible period." Those words hung in the air, and the car fell silent enough to hear a pin drop. Since the last preliminary phase, he had managed to delay the full onset for over a month. sustained by the ambient pheromones from his daily interactions with Leo. Now, it could be delayed no longer. The drunkenness from 3 light beers evaporated instantly. Leo was sober with shock, his gaze darting around nervously. He licked his dry lips, speechless. Over the past month, their cohabitation had been so peaceful that he had almost forgotten about this, forgotten that he was, in essence, Julian's living, breathing medicine. To help delay it before, he had given him a pillow. He had even let him scent the back of his neck from a distance. After that, they had spent hours together in the study every day. He could accept that level of interaction. It was consistent with their agreement. The question was, now that the susceptible period had officially begun, would that still be enough? And if it wasn't, how much more would be required? After all, Julian himself had said that this time, for some reason, it was coming on especially strong. As Leo's mind waged a silent war, a low chuckle echoed through the car. "Don't be afraid," Julian said, rubbing the throbbing vein at his temple. The pain deepened the lines on his brow, but he forced himself to remain composed, to reassure him. "You don't have to help this time." Leo swallowed hard, his voice dry as he pointed out that he had been helping for the past month. Julian sighed, explaining that was just the preliminary phase, which was mild. This time it wouldn't work. The sweet scent of vanilla was now quietly diffusing through the car. It was sweet, but faint. Mingled with the sharp, rich tequila scent of the evening, it was almost completely lost. The differentiation of an omega gland is a long process, often spanning the entirety of adolescence. It generally takes 2 to 4 years for the full set of glands and reproductive organs to mature. Leo's case was special. His differentiation would be faster, but it would still take at least a year. In other words, he was not yet a fully mature omega. His natural pheromone concentration was lower than normal, the scent fainter, like a flower bud yet to bloom. This level of pheromones was sufficient for the preliminary phase, but this time it was definitely not enough. Julian told him plainly that his pheromones were too faint. Leo asked anxiously how he could make them stronger. Julian cut him off, telling him not to ask. He laughed self-deprecatingly, saying he shouldn't have ridden in the same car, that he hadn't planned on telling him at all. He said he could endure it, that he had endured it for over a decade, and this time would be no different. He instructed him to go straight to his own room when they got home and not to worry about him. As he spoke, a sharp spasm of pain in his head made him draw in a sharp, quiet breath. It was almost inaudible, lighter than a whisper, but it struck the softest part of Leo's heart, causing the wavering scales of his decision to crash down on one side with a resounding thud. This was Julian, who was so good to him. So incredibly good to him. A rush of blood filled Leo's head. Words he would never normally be able to say rose up from his chest, fueled by a youthful, impulsive energy, and broke through the barrier of his shyness. He blurted out, Would physical contact help? Are you sure?" Julian looked up, a barely perceptible smile flashing in the depths of his dark eyes. He issued a gentlemanly, apologetic to his innocent young partner. "I might need to hold you, and my personality might not be the same as usual. Alphas become possessive, jealous, and clingy during their susceptible period, their personalities undergoing a drastic change." The whites of Julian's eyes were already bloodshot with pain, but his expression remained one of restraint. He looked perfectly normal. Leo had been an A-grade alpha for 3 years himself. He felt that he had been far more irritable and sullen during his own susceptible periods. In comparison, Julian seemed completely harmless. However, the vast chasm between an A+ and an A-grade alpha was something a high school student with limited biological knowledge like Leo could not possibly comprehend. Julian was currently enduring an emotional storm hundreds of times more intense than anything he had ever experienced. Therefore, for an A+ grade alpha in the throes of his susceptible period, looking normal was the most abnormal thing of all. Leo, realizing what he'd said, blushed and nearly bit his tongue. I'm sure. After speaking, he couldn't bring himself to look at Julian and turned to face the front. At some point, the privacy partition between the front and back of the Rolls-Royce had switched from transparent to opaque white. Leo stared at it, his eyes fixed, too nervous to notice the subtle change. He heard the rustle of suit fabric beside him. The space that had separated them was now shrinking. In his peripheral vision, an arm clad in silver-gray fabric extended. Julian's voice, low and magnetic, sounded from just above his head, the warm breath that accompanied it brushing against his ear. "Let me hold you." Leo's ears burned, and he remained frozen. Julian moved closer, his chest hard but with a rubber-like resilience, pressing slowly and firmly against him. An embrace. Leo turned his face away, embarrassed. He couldn't remember the last time he had hugged someone, or who it had been. It was probably his mother. He wouldn't have let anyone else hug him. But the exact time was lost to memory. Boys in their late teens often reject such intimacy, shying away from affection as if it were a venomous snake, afraid it would scorch their fragile pride. Fortunately, Julian's embrace was light, his arms resting gently on Leo's thin back, like a heavy branch of pear blossoms tenderly enclosing a cluster of fresh crabapple flowers, careful not to crush them. The scent of tequila pressed down on Leo, its richness like an invasion. He had always thought of himself as the caregiver in this situation, but he had forgotten that the interaction between alpha and omega pheromones is never one way. His own omega gland, enveloped in the dense tequila scent, began to soften and warm. A skilled alpha moves with ease, cunningly drawing out and exploiting the still-developing gland of an omega. It was too inexperienced. After a few teases from the alpha, it began to release a high concentration of pheromones without reservation. The sweet scent of vanilla pumped out, thick as nectar, triggering a chain reaction. With just an embrace, the bones of his spine felt as if they were dissolving. Leo went limp, unable to lift his head, and could only bury his face in Julian's shoulder, panting in small gasps, his warm breath dampening the fabric. He whispered Julian's name, a plea for mercy. He was so bewildered he didn't even know what he was begging for. He was simply following his instincts, unwilling to fall so easily into an alpha's sensual trap. A slow, rising intonation of acknowledgement was the only reply. Julian slowly tightened his arms, his strength like cast iron, suppressing Leo's feeble struggles. This one was still wearing a patch. To prevent any possible retreat, he blocked any further conversation by glancing at the back of Leo's neck and changing the subject, remarking that the patch would make the scent fainter. A small, white corner of a patch peeked out from the back of Leo's suit collar. It was wrinkled, damp, and printed with a delicate blue floral pattern. It was a scent blocker. Leo had been wearing it all day and had forgotten to change it. It had lost its effectiveness. Not only did it fail to block the scent, but it had also absorbed so many pheromones that the area was now more fragrant than anywhere else. For an omega, a scent blocker was an intimate item. Leo was vaguely aware of this, but he wasn't as sensitive as other omegas might be. He still didn't fully see himself as one. Julian's gaze was dark as he peeled the scent blocker off, cunningly crumpling it in his hand, a small trophy collected. The possessiveness and desire that had been raging like mad dogs against the walls of his reason were momentarily placated, the frenzy slightly abated. He had done the same thing last time, and Leo had never even asked about it. Leo struggled, his face red, and demanded it back so he could throw it away himself. His time at school had instilled in him some awareness of gender-specific customs. His Omega classmates would wrap their used scent blockers in thick layers of tissue before throwing them away, and they would never let an alpha touch them. He had been far too careless in that regard. Julian was silent for a moment. He didn't give it back, but he didn't refuse either. Instead, he warned him sternly not to move around so much. Any man, no matter how innocent, would understand what "don't move around so much" implied. As expected, Leo stayed still for a little while. After a minute, he tried again, hesitantly asking for the patch back, attempting to pry open Julian's fingers. His intention wasn't to struggle, but Julian was holding him so tightly that to even lift his arm, he had to first break free. But this movement, with its implication of escape, was precisely what triggered the susceptible alpha's deepest fears. Julian's breathing suddenly became heavy and ragged. As if terrified he would run, he instantly tightened his embrace. Leo, pained by the pressure, instinctively struggled. Not only did he fail to break free, but he was also pushed forcefully into the corner between the car door and the seat, pinned there by Julian's entire body. He let out a muffled sound of protest. Julian, his sanity hanging by a thread, forced himself to relax his grip and whispered a placating lie, telling him to be good, that he would throw it away in a moment just to let him hold it for a little while, just 5 minutes. An hour-long car ride passed. Leo was pinned in the corner, enveloped in scent, not daring to move a muscle. When he finally got out of the car, his legs were trembling, the corners of his eyes were damp and red, and his heart was pounding so hard his chest ached. The custom-made suit, which had cost a small fortune, was now a wrinkled mess, front and back, like a piece of dried cabbage. As he walked into the house, Leo tugged at the hem of his jacket, trying to smooth it out, his mind fuzzily wondering where he could find an iron. He hadn't taken more than a few steps when he sensed something was wrong. He turned around and found himself face to face with a silk, pale blue tie knot. It was incredibly close with a manic intensity. He stared, dumbfounded, asking how he wasn't better yet. Even an A-grade alpha, after inhaling such a large quantity of pheromones, should be back to normal for at least a few hours. An A+ grade alpha was not what he had imagined. And sure enough, Julian's voice was a low growl as he asked, "Better from what?" He was staring at him with a predatory gaze. The still-developing Omega gland, having released a high concentration of pheromones for an entire hour, was now sore and empty. His limbs felt weak, as if he had been completely drained. And he still wanted more? Leo was stunned. A belated sense of crisis finally dawned on him. Like a cunning hawk circling over a small animal's den, luring the young creature out, only for it to find there was nowhere to hide upon its return. Leo's mind was in chaos. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to remain calm. I still have a set of practice tests to finish. He used his studies as a shield. Academics were his top priority. Julian himself had said so when he was lecturing him. He wasn't trying to be difficult or stop the treatment for the susceptible period syndrome. He just needed a moment to breathe, to calm down. Even an hour or two would be enough. He felt like he was at his limit. He didn't know what limit or how, but he was. Julian nodded, his pupils dark and unreadable. Leo pressed his advantage, adding that his midterms were coming up and he couldn't afford to slack off. Julian's response was a simple, agreeable sound. He was being so reasonable. Leo, sensing an opening, said he was going to go study, a quiet sense of relief washing over him. Julian agreed again. He was being so cooperative. 10 minutes later, A physics worksheet lay open on the desk. Leo sat in front of it, the heel of his hand pressed against his forehead. His fingers desperately tangled in his hair to alleviate his embarrassment. His head was bowed so low his nose was almost touching the paper. The executive chair was large, just barely accommodating 2 people. Behind him, Julian had his long, powerful legs spread wide, effectively trapping him. His arms were wrapped around Leo's slim waist, caging him in. Julian had let him go to the study to do his homework. But he never imagined this was how he would be doing it. The frame of a mature alpha was tall and imposing. Leo, whose growth had been stunted by his midstream differentiation, looked small and thin in comparison, completely enveloped in Julian's embrace. No matter how much he tried to act nonchalant, he only looked more helpless. He had been granted permission and thought he could finish his last assignment in peace, so he had let his guard down. He never expected Julian to follow him silently, lock the study door as soon as they were inside, and then, while maintaining half of his usual dignified, gentlemanly demeanor, become utterly clingy and obsessive. He held Leo loosely, his eyes full of apology, his words measured and considerate. But the heat of his breath against Leo's ear was scorching. He explained that this episode was particularly stubborn, that he had thought he could hold out until Leo finished his work before needing another 10 minutes of treatment. Leo's lips parted in a look of stunned, pitiable disbelief. How could he? He swallowed the rest of his words. How could he be like this? Julian, seeing his silence as he seemed to be processing what was happening, gave a self-deprecating little laugh, as if ashamed of his ungentlemanly behavior during his susceptible period. He didn't give Leo a chance to think. He humbled himself completely, his voice soft and pleading, as if he were in a desperate situation. Just do your work as usual. Pretend I'm not here. Is that okay? Leo had a kind heart, a soft spot, and was starved for affection. When someone showed him an ounce of kindness, he was overwhelmed, wanting to repay it tenfold. Julian's methods were relentless, harmless but shameless. He had first seen Leo at a race. He wasn't particularly passionate about Formula One. He had gone simply to kill time. But his eyes had been captivated by a silver car that shot across the track like a meteor. The masterful driving, the fearless cornering at high speeds, the precise, decisive judgment, and the hint of madness in his aggressive pursuit. It all led Julian to believe the driver was a young, spirited alpha, a fierce little wolf. He never expected. The contrast was too great. Formula One is an incredibly physically demanding sport. The G-forces during a high-speed turn can be enough to break a driver's neck. It was a kingdom ruled by alphas. Even betas were rare, let alone a delicate omega. The slender necks and weaker muscles of omegas would likely not withstand a single turn. They usually appeared at the track as grid girls, their role to liven up the atmosphere. A lean, beautiful omega driver, mixed in with a group of strong, muscular alphas, looked completely out of place. Yet, like a magnet, he had captured Julian's full attention. He found himself irresistibly drawn to him. Of course, Leo's presence on the racetrack was not a fluke. He was able to be a driver thanks in part to his pseudo-alpha differentiation. The 3 years he spent as a high-level alpha during his adolescence had given him a superior physical foundation. Though he appeared slim, his muscle strength was considerable. The other part was due to his astonishingly rigorous training regimen. During the off-season, he would engage in various high-intensity endurance training. He seemed to enjoy the state of mental quiet that came with complete physical exhaustion. This was the person he was. Ferocious as a wolf on the track. Cool and aloof in public, marching to the beat of his own drum. But after months of an elaborate and creative courtship, Only in front of Julian did he begin to peel back his layers, revealing a soft, sweet core. Incredibly soft, and so docile and clingy. Only for him, Julian had fallen willingly and completely. Another 6 months of pursuit would have been worth it. The 22-year-old Leo had been much harder to approach, much colder than the 18-year-old version. So now, Julian felt as if he were playing with a cheat code, using his max-level experience to pursue a partner who was currently so innocent he would melt with a little heat. He was truly innocent, so pure, and he was, to some extent, taking advantage of that innocence. But what did it matter? He would repay Leo 100-fold, love him with all his heart. Even if everything else was a lie, his feelings were entirely genuine. He showered him with apologies, each word sincere, his handsome, powerfully intense face softened by a rare look of guilt. Yet his body acted like a beast, holding the inexperienced youth tightly in his arms, trapping him, pulling him onto the chair with him, pressing so close it made the boy blush, all while sanctimoniously urging him to do his physics problems. The excess alpha hormones from his susceptible period had finally unleashed all the worst parts of his nature. In his arms was the love he had dreamed of, lost and found again. He adored him so much it hurt, and he couldn't bring himself to act decently for a single moment. Julian's breathing was heavy, the hot air thick with pheromones washing over the back of Leo's neck, forcing the already exhausted omega gland to pump out more sweetness. Leo gripped his pen, the barrel slick with sweat, almost slipping from his grasp. His mind and the paper in front of him were both blank. He tried to inch forward, ever so slowly, to steal a sliver of space, a second of breath. But the iron-hard arms around his waist were more alert than he had imagined. They suddenly tightened, pulling him back, making the embrace even closer. Julian had changed. It was true that alphas underwent personality changes during their susceptible period, but Leo's mind struggled to function. He wasn't just different from when they first met. He was a different person from just a few hours ago. It was as if all his previous gentleness had been an act. No, he shouldn't think that way about him. To vent his helpless frustration, Leo's hand on his forehead clenched into a fist, the knuckles turning white with strain, nearly pulling out a few strands of hair. Suddenly, Julian's low voice asked why he wasn't writing. As if to maintain the pretense that this was just a treatment happening while he did his homework, he feigned ignorance and asked if he didn't know how to do the problem. Leo nodded randomly. It was the first multiple-choice question. Julian recited a physics formula, the vibration of his throat and chest transferring to Leo's back, making even his internal organs tingle. The base of Leo's spine suddenly went weak. If it weren't for the two long legs firmly pinning him, he would have slid right under the desk. There was something Leo wouldn't admit, or rather hadn't even considered. Their genes were a 100% match. Julian's pheromones held an absolute attraction for him. The sharp, rich scent of tequila that repeatedly washed over the back of his neck. He thought he might like it. He couldn't stop the blush, the racing heart. It was so strange. Julian's dark eyes were fixed on him as he asked if he understood now what the answer was. Leo, startled out of his daze, glanced at the paper and stammered that he didn't know, maybe C. C was the one option that could be immediately ruled out. Julian asked, feigning concern, if he was having trouble concentrating. Leo, desperately trying to maintain a cool expression, shifted the blame, saying his stomach felt a little strange, and that's why he couldn't focus. He wasn't very good at lying, but this wasn't entirely a lie. His abdomen did feel strange. It had started on the car ride home when Julian first held him, and the sensation had been steadily intensifying. It wasn't exactly painful, more of a dull, itchy, congested feeling, a mixture of subtle discomforts that made him want to reach into his own stomach and scratch. Julian frowned, asking if he had eaten something bad. Leo said it wasn't that, he just couldn't explain it. He shifted uncomfortably. He asked if the treatment wasn't over yet, that it must have been 10 minutes. As he spoke, a large, warm hand slid down to his abdomen, landing precisely on the area of discomfort. Julian confirmed if this was where it felt bad. Leo mumbled his assent. A smile touched Julian's lips. Under his palm, a thin layer of soft skin covered the newly developed internal cavity. The nerves were hyperstimulated, the mucous membranes engorged. This series of changes was creating a sensation of itchy soreness within the cavity, almost like a faint pain. It was a reaction unique to omegas, a preparation for an impending mark. For Leo, this experience was entirely new, so he didn't understand. There is a kind of discomfort that is actually arousal, actually desire. He knew nothing. He didn't even realize he had been seduced by Julian to the point of desire. He was just so embarrassed, wanting only to return to a normal state. It felt worse now, he pleaded, telling him to stop. He couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed Julian's wrist and pushed his hand away, forcing a hard tone as he said it had been 20 minutes, that he couldn't go back on his word. Julian showed a rare stubbornness, his strength unyielding as he moved his hand back to Leo's abdomen. Leo was so thin, his waist a narrow strip of flesh that seemed to invite a hand to grasp it, to commit some mischief. His voice was hoarse as he asked, "Do you know what's in your stomach?" The fingertips registered a soft, supple texture. Due to his omega development, a very thin layer of fat now covered his previously lean, defined abs. It wasn't visible to the eye, but the smooth, warm touch, like fine suede, didn't lie. It existed alongside the firmness of the muscle beneath, like velvet wrapped around stone. It was driving him mad. Just then, stimulated by the pressure on the internal cavity, the sweet scent of vanilla suddenly intensified. His beloved omega was unknowingly stirring, desiring him. This realization made Julian's arms, wrapped in his suit, tremble with excitement. Sweat beaded on his handsome nose. His lips, his eyes, everything seemed to throb with the hot blood pumping through him, in sync with his heart. Leo, not daring to confront the terrifying suspicion in his mind, could only stammer that his stomach was just his stomach, as he tried to pry Julian's hand away. In his panic, he used too much force, leaving several red and white finger marks on Julian's vein or wrist, like cat scratches. He begged him to let go, just for a second. Suddenly, a spasm shot through his abdomen. The sensation was strange, indescribable, but it was accompanied by a massive wave of shame. Leo's breath hitched, his clear voice turning slightly hoarse. Let go. He was like a helpless kitten, dragged back to a predator's den and licked clean, terrified and pathetic, its fur matted and sticking up in clumps, on the verge of a stress-induced breakdown. His mental state, his over-secreting gland, his physical stamina, everything, he was at his limit. Furthermore, it was questionable whether his not yet fully developed omega gland could even withstand the bite of an A+ alpha. He couldn't push it any further. Leo couldn't take it. He had already taken more than enough tonight. Julian's eyes were bloodshot, his jaw set in a sharp, rigid line as he stared at Leo. His fragile reason wrestled with his primal alpha instincts. He was like a tiger drooling over fresh meat, starving and desperate, but he clenched his fists, reined in his wild, scorching emotions, and slowly released his grip, allowing his omega to escape his embrace like a frightened animal, to put distance between them. He endured the hunger and loss, a pain that was nothing short of psychological torture for an alpha. Leo had wrapped himself in the duvet like a cocoon, with only one hand sticking out to hold his phone. He glanced at the time and closed his eyes. Tomorrow was Monday, a morning full of math and science classes. His brain would need to be firing on all cylinders. He couldn't afford to be tired. He tried to force himself to sleep, but his brow was furrowed, his face scrunched up like a steamed bun with 18 folds. A few minutes later, he opened his eyes in defeat, realizing his face was sore from the effort. 2:37 a.m. He calculated the remaining hours of sleep and felt even more awake. He had been on edge ever since he fled the study. He had crouched on the balcony and smoked an entire pack of cigarettes until his legs felt weak, but his heart refused to slow down, pounding against his ribs until it ached. Julian hadn't come looking for him, and he didn't dare go looking for Julian. A phantom sensation lingered on his abdomen, as if the heat from Julian's palm were still baking him. Leo thrashed in bed, burying his face in the pillow. His ears were red, his dark hair a mess from tossing and turning. He had escaped, he had to. The Julian from tonight was not right. He could understand that it wasn't right. After all, an alpha during their susceptible period is not entirely in control of themselves, especially a high-level one. Losing control wasn't surprising. Even the strongest willpower has its limits. But Julian's behavior earlier, it was by any measure a bit much. Leo pulled the edge of the duvet up over his head, as if he could trap all his chaotic thoughts in a net. As much as it was too much. The moment he left the study, he hadn't felt much relief from escaping. It was more worry and guilt. He had run in such a hurry, but thinking back, Julian's expression had seemed wrong. What exactly was wrong? Leo tried hard to remember. All that came to mind was the image of a wrist marked with his own fingerprints and a pair of eyes, dark and crazed, yet desperately restrained. He realized with a jolt that even if he hadn't struggled so hard, Julian wouldn't have done anything more. Leo grabbed a handful of his hair, kicked the duvet off, and got out of bed. If he didn't go check, his conscience would kill him. The sconces on the hallway walls were lit, casting soft halos of light. Julian's bedroom door was slightly ajar, revealing a sliver of darkness. It didn't look like anyone was asleep inside. Leo hesitated, unsure if he was more worried or relieved, and quietly pushed the door open wider. He took a few steps inside, looking toward the bed. The light from the hallway spilled in. The king-sized bed, absurdly large, was a wreck. The charcoal gray silk sheets and duvet were twisted together like a wrung-out towel and seemed to be torn in several places, as if the person lying there had gone into a frenzy. On the nightstand was an empty syringe, snapped in two, along with several colorful pill bottles and boxes. One bottle was uncapped, its white pills scattered across the floor. The bottle itself was strangely dented, as if the person who opened it had lost control of their strength. And he was the one telling him not to take medicine recklessly. This scene did not look like someone taking their medication normally. A sharp ache shot through his nose. Leo turned and ran downstairs. On the first floor, the room of the head butler, Arthur, was also empty, the door wide open, the bed covers thrown back, clearly indicating he had left in a hurry. The house was enormous. Leo began opening doors at random, making 2 calls, one to Julian and one to Arthur. Both numbers were out of service. Could the signal in a hospital be that bad? Leo frowned. He knew that sometimes, to avoid hurting others during a susceptible period, a high-level alpha would have someone lock them up while they still had their senses. When he had been an alpha, there were a few times when his susceptible period had been particularly severe, and his mother had locked him in the bathroom of their old house. Once, he had been so agitated he had kicked the door down. Julian, he probably had a safe room. Leo turned and ran toward the stairs leading to the basement. Sure enough, the stairway lights were on. Halfway down, he ran into Arthur coming up from around the corner. The butler's usually composed, professional face was etched with a rare anxiety. Leo, panting slightly from the run, asked if Julian was down there. Arthur was stunned. He had been instructed to cover this up, planning to say that Mr. Thorne was at a special medical facility for a few days. He never expected to be cornered in the basement. In this situation, insisting Julian wasn't home would be like trying to fool a child. He gave a dry laugh and tried to deflect, saying that it was late and Leo should go to bed, that he had to be up at 6:30. Leo cut him off, stating that he must be here then, and deftly slipped past him. Arthur, horrified, called after him and hurried to catch up. The basement had many rooms, but Leo's eyes were immediately drawn to one that was different. It had a metal door, thick and heavy-looking, like the door to a bank vault. He went over to it, fumbling for a way to open it, and reassured Arthur that he wouldn't get him in trouble, that he would say he found it himself. He added that it was the truth anyway. Arthur hesitated. Would he get in trouble with Mr. Thorne? It was hard to say, but maybe this was for the best. The young couple had been married for so long, not only sleeping in separate rooms but also being so polite and distant with each other. And Mr. Thorne was suffering so much during his susceptible period, locking himself away to endure it alone. Anyone with eyes could see how happy he was about this marriage. It was the young Mr. Vance who was reluctant, now that he had come looking on his own, and with such concern. Besides, the boy was as fast as a rabbit. How was an old man like him supposed to stop him? Arthur continued to feign reluctance, but seeing Leo struggling with the door, he maintained his worried expression while surreptitiously making a few hand gestures, showing him how to open it. The door creaked open a few inches. Despite the safe room having its own independent ventilation system, the wave of tequila scent that hit him was so thick it felt tangible. A single breath felt like inhaling pure liquor. The walls and floor were covered in a soft, cotton-like material to prevent Julian from hurting himself during a frenzy. There was no cell signal in the room, but it was equipped with an emergency communication device that could call several internal lines in the house, his parents' numbers, and the city's emergency services. And there was Julian, sitting on the edge of the bed, facing away from him. His legs were spread, his elbows resting on his knees, a silent, violent stone statue. Hearing the door open, he turned his head, his gaze locking onto Leo, who was standing in the doorway. His eyes were dark voids, burned out by desire. Desire, mixed with greed, possessiveness, hunger, obsession thick and black as tar. On the back of his neck at his gland was a used scent blocker. It was damp, wrinkled, printed with delicate blue flowers, saturated with omega pheromones and sweat. A secret, perverse, and almost obscenely sensual object stuck to an alpha's neck. In the 2 hours since Leo had left him, he had sat in this isolated room, repeatedly stroking that scent blocker, trying to soothe his insatiable agitation, to avoid hurting his still innocent love. No one would ever believe that the head of the Thorne family was satisfying himself with a scent blocker he had practically stolen. Fortunately, most of it was hidden by his collar. Leo's legs trembled. He swallowed hard and, bracing himself against the storm-level, highly corrosive alpha pheromones, took a step inside. From this angle, he could only see Julian's hands hanging between his knees. Both were wrapped in bandages with blood seeping through the palms. From clenching his fists, Julian's jaw muscles were trembling violently. He forced out two muffled words from between his teeth. "Go back." The room wasn't large. Leo took a few more steps closer. After the ordeal of the evening, it seemed some threshold within him had been forcibly raised. Although his voice was so dry it sounded foreign even to himself, he was still able to articulate his thoughts clearly in this situation. He suggested they just hold each other for a while, that he couldn't just endure it like this. Leaving aside the subjective suffering, extreme cases of susceptible period syndrome could lead to shock. The risk was real. It was an outdated, barbaric evolutionary mechanism. In primitive times, it compelled genetically superior alphas to seek out highly compatible omegas, to insatiably plunder, possess, mark, and procreate. For early humans, for whom instinct was paramount, it was a beneficial mechanism. However, the laws, morals, reason, and increasingly complex emotions that came with civilization had obstructed this selfish genetic imperative. He cherished him too much, liked him too much. And so, in the eyes of a lover, the innocent object of his affection became a budding flower. He could inhale its fragrance, gently touch its petals, and even steal a drop of nectar from its core in a moment of weakness. But he couldn't bring himself to break the stem. But there is a limit to endurance. And he had come here on his own. Julian lowered his eyes, not looking at Leo. Beneath his half-closed lids, his eyes twitched nervously. He seemed to be hovering on the edge of some critical point. A single touch could ignite him. Seeing Julian remain motionless, Leo took two more steps forward and stood in front of him, saying he was mentally prepared. His slender neck and hands, set against his lake blue pajamas, looked as white as carved jade. Deliberately or not, he adopted a posture of feigned nonchalance to dilute the inherent intimacy of this treatment method. He said that he could hold him however he wanted this time, that it was fine, he just wasn't used to it before. Before he could finish, the world spun. The astonishing speed and strength of an A+ alpha were on full display. With a thud, Leo was thrown onto the bed. The mattress was soft so it didn't hurt, but it was terrifying. He was about to get up when Julian's hot hand clamped down on the back of his neck. His entire body went rigid. Male felines will sometimes bite the back of a female's neck to prevent her from escaping mid-copulation. Perhaps due to a similar structure in omegas, alphas exhibit a similar instinct, restraining omegas in the same way during intimate acts. And omegas, in turn, have evolved a corresponding physiological reflex. When the back of their neck is held by a highly compatible alpha with whom they have a bond of trust, they enter a state of submission, their muscle tension decreasing, making it difficult to resist. It was very convenient for alphas. Leo gritted his teeth and struggled, but his movements were weak. That carefully selected biology book had mentioned this. Julian had even underlined it, but he hadn't read it. He had thought his fists were enough to protect himself, but he was wrong. He was about to pay the price for his arrogance. He was going to be bullied, as if being tortured by some sweet, sharp instrument. A prominent blue vein throbbed on the side of Julian's neck. His jaw was clenched so tightly his teeth ground together with an audible crunch. Even now, he was still fighting for control. He forcefully pulled down the collar of Leo's pajama top and slowly, meticulously ran his fingertips along both sides of his delicate spine, checking the maturity of the omega gland hidden beneath the smooth skin. The texture was wrong, the size too small, the reaction to an alpha's touch sluggish, all signs of low development. Even a temporary mark could cause damage. After all this time being married, this was the first time they had ever directly touched each other's skin. The warm contact sent a shiver through both of them. Julian could no longer control his strength. His touch was rough. And so, Leo's response was swift. On either side of his spine, the area of his omega gland was flushed a deep, unnatural pink. Driven by the blood vessels beneath the skin, it pulsed with a faint, regular rhythm, releasing waves of an especially seductive fragrance. This was proof of its sensitivity to an alpha, and its softness and size were within the range that could withstand a temporary mark. Julian had been wanting to take Leo for a full set of omega development checkups for some time, but knowing how self-conscious he was, he had never brought it up. He never expected to be conducting a preliminary examination himself in a much more direct way. Because he was so thin, with little subcutaneous fat, Leo's skin seemed very delicate. His omega gland was already slightly swollen from the stimulation, like a ripe fruit ready to fall from the branch. The thin skin struggled to contain it, red and swollen, practically begging to be bitten. The scent was also quite mixed in with the familiar vanilla was a faint, metallic sweetness. It was the scent of desire. As the heat in his omega gland surged, an unprecedented restlessness swept through his body. His bones felt like they were turning to jelly. Even without Julian holding him down, he couldn't have escaped. He didn't know what was happening. He felt weaker than when he had a high fever, his thoughts doubly chaotic. The colors in his vision intensified. Even the off-white soft padding on the walls and floor seemed to glow with a strange, decadent beauty under the lights. The indescribable ache in his abdomen returned as well. Leo restlessly turned his head, trying to see what was happening to the back of his neck, like a clumsy kitten chasing its own tail. Of course, he couldn't see anything, so he could only turn to Julian for help. Even in his dazed state, he knew who the culprit behind all these changes was. But he could only ask the culprit for help. Julian, what's happening to me? Julian remained silent, his Adam's apple bobbing. He had been trying to content himself with just the scent. But now Leo, overstimulated, had suddenly gone into his first heat, and was now, in his ignorance, calling his name repeatedly. Julian's gaze burned into the back of Leo's neck, hot enough to set him on fire. Leo pleaded, saying he didn't feel well, that he just needed to be held. Nothing else. Was that okay? In his struggle to get free, he twisted like a willow branch in the wind, a thin sheen of sweat beading on his forehead. He called out helplessly to the man he thought of as a kind gentleman, begging for mercy, trying to awaken Julian's dormant conscience and reason. But the arrow had already left the bow. The moment he stepped into the safe room, the outcome had been sealed. Yet he still thought someone could save him. And the high fever that had been building for so long, fueled by that Julian and his brain's selective hearing of "hold me," finally ignited everything flammable within him. His ears roared, his vision exploded in a flash of white, his blood surged. When he came to his senses, his sharp canines had already pierced the skin, embedding themselves in the gland at the back of Leo's neck, injecting a small amount of pheromones. The rich tequila and sweet vanilla blended, creating a wonderful chemical reaction, a new compound that smelled like something between the two, yet not quite like either. This new scent, a symbol of a temporary mark, could solve the susceptible period problem at its source. Julian took a deep breath. The torturous, bone-deep pain, the overwhelming sensory information, the chaotic thoughts, all of it subsided in an instant. It was like being reborn. His nose brushed against the damp ends of Leo's hair. Julian looked down and gently turned Leo's face, which had been buried in the pillow, toward him. Leo's cheeks were as pink as a spring peach. An Omega's first heat is usually quite intense, affecting their mental state. Leo was a perfect example. His eyes were wide open, his light-colored pupils filled with the dazed, vacant look of someone drunk. He was clearly no longer lucid. Thanks to this lack of lucidity, his last vestiges of pretense had vanished. He had not only forgotten he was once an alpha, but he had even forgotten to hide the desire for Julian born from pure biological attraction. It was all there, exposed in his watery gaze. The temporary mark was only halfway complete. The amount of alpha pheromones injected was still small. Normally, Julian might have stopped there, as his symptoms had already eased considerably. But now, he had to use every ounce of his willpower to resist the urge to devour Leo whole, to crush him into pieces. He flipped him over, propping himself up on one hand next to his ear, and teased him like a cute little drunken shrimp, his voice low. "Who am I?" Leo answered obediently, his nostrils flaring slightly as he contentedly inhaled his scent from a safe distance. You're Julian. Such a good boy." He was completely out of it, yet he still remembered his manners. "And what is Julian to you?" "Just Julian." "Wrong." Leo was stumped. After a moment's hesitation, he ventured a guess. "Also, the person I have a marriage certificate with." "And what is the person you have a marriage certificate with to you?" But Leo, though not fully coherent, instinctively dodged the sharp question, rambling about how their marriage was a business arrangement, a fake marriage, that it didn't count. Julian's voice was a low murmur as he corrected him, stating that legally, there is no such thing as a fake marriage, that their marital relationship was real and valid. Leo fell silent. Julian repeated the question, his voice hoarse. He was unusually persistent, as if seeking justification for what he was about to do. The answer was obvious. An alpha with a marriage certificate is a husband. Even a kindergartner would know that. But Leo looked up, a novel expression on his face, a mixture of shyness and evasion as he studied Julian. Julian enunciated each word. "I am your husband." The next second, a weight settled on Julian's chest. Leo, overcome with shyness, trying to escape his predatory gaze, had nowhere to hide. His little head turned this way and that in confusion, and then, dizzily, he burrowed into his chest. He had walked right into the trap. Even a saint would have found this hard to resist. Julian held the lean, resilient youth in his arms, his canines sinking completely into the back of his neck. A large amount of highly corrosive alpha pheromones was injected without reservation, washing over the swollen omega gland in hot waves. A plus-grade pheromones are, after all, extremely potent. The injection can affect the pain receptors. The back of his neck burned with a hot, sharp pain. Even though his limbs were practically useless, Leo gritted his teeth and began to struggle. Dizzily, heedless of the fact that Julian's teeth were still embedded in his flesh, he tried to wrench his neck to the side. If he had succeeded, the minor bite mark, which would have healed easily, would have been torn open. The thought of that happening made Julian's heart ache. He quickly cupped Leo's chin, letting the sharp little jawbone press and grind against the bleeding palm of his hand. He ignored the pain in his hand, holding on even tighter, lost in the intoxication of the temporary mark. "Don't move, just bear with it," Julian soothed, his voice hoarse. He was using the same shameless lines alphas have used to placate their partners for millennia, but his were laced with a deeper affection, a greater tenderness. "It will be over soon, baby," Leo shuddered. His 10 slender fingers, clutching at Julian's shoulders, suddenly curled, digging in, as if a surge of energy had nowhere to go. The endearing term, more than the temporary mark itself, filled him with a shame that almost shocked him out of his haze. Julian didn't often use such words. In the past, Leo had been too thin-skinned to handle such intense flirting. It was as if he had been holding back for too long. Once the floodgates opened, he couldn't stop. His voice was a low, raspy whisper against Leo's ear, the sound abrading the air, making it hot and heavy with shame. "Baby, Leo, sweetheart." Leo's ears were bright red. He tried to shrink away, but he was held fast. The heat was raging. Being coaxed repeatedly by a highly compatible alpha was agonizing, yet strangely exhilarating. Even his toes curled. The mental, the physical, the underdeveloped, immature gland had endured too much. The moment the temporary mark was complete, a soft, kitten-like whimper escaped Leo's throat. His bare feet kicked out spasmodically, and he fainted in Julian's arms. For an alpha in their susceptible period, a temporary mark on the neck is often just the beginning of a series of intimate acts, an appetizer. The physical pain was alleviated, but the mental hunger was not satisfied. In fact, it only stirred a greater craving. Julian held the slender youth in his arms, greedily inhaling the scent of vanilla-infused liquor, the scent of a completed temporary mark, a scent both familiar and new. It had tormented his desires and soothed his madness, relieved his pain countless times. A deep, powerful emotion seeped into his every breath, rising and falling with his chest like the tide. The madness, the bestial nature, the cruel instincts, all gradually dissolved into an overwhelming love, breaking apart into salty white foam. He supported Leo's thin shoulders, his breathing still heavy, his eyes bloodshot, but with a restrained tenderness. He laid him down as if he were a piece of fragile porcelain. He gently straightened the collar of his pajamas. Then he picked up the internal phone. Grace Mercy Private Hospital. East Wing, 3rd floor. The new patient needed quiet. The Thorne family had cleared the entire floor. Except for room 305, all the other rooms were empty. It was so quiet you could hear the rustling of the willow branches in the wind outside. Leo slept deeply. He had inherited his mother's delicate features. When he was awake, his face was cool and distant, his features as if carved from snow. Only when he slept, completely unguarded, did a hint of his youthfulness show. The past 2 months of regular, nutritious meals had helped him gain a few pounds. The sharp angles of his bones had softened, and his cheeks had regained a youthful curve. Morning. It was time to wash his face. Julian sat by the bed, his watch removed, the cuffs of his shirt rolled up twice. He dipped a towel in warm water, wrung it out, and gently wiped Leo's forehead, the corners of his eyes, his cheeks, after being marked for the first time by an A+ alpha. Even a fully mature, older Omega would be expected to sleep for a day or two, let alone an underdeveloped Omega youth. The A+ pheromones were too potent, slightly destructive. The body needed to repair itself and record the information during sleep, so that the next time it was marked by the same A+ alpha, the adverse reactions would be lessened. Leo had been unconscious for 3 days. His test results were normal for now. But because he had been marked mid-differentiation, it was uncertain if there would be any short-term side effects. The doctors recommended he stay for observation for a while, to monitor his 24-hour hormone fluctuations and provide treatment as needed. An itchy, damp sensation on his face, like being licked by a large dog. Leo frowned, his eyelashes fluttered, and he suddenly opened his eyes. He had been asleep for so long his consciousness was scattered. He blinked, his eyes vacant. He saw a white ceiling, white walls, white sheets, and a hand. The back of the hand and wrist had a few faint blue veins. The cuff of a fog blue shirt was neatly rolled. It was the steady hand of a mature man, yet its movements were impossibly gentle, wiping his face with a damp towel. Dazed, his gaze followed the arm up. Julian was sitting by the bed, watching him. His eyes were dark, their expression unreadable except for a deep tenderness, hidden away. He looked like a silent, ruthless hunter who had set 1,000 traps and was now hiding in the tall grass, calmly observing, waiting to see which pit the precious young creature would fall into, so he could follow, scoop up the soft little thing, and claim it as his own. The memories from before he lost consciousness came rushing back. The family dinner, the light beer, the embrace in the back of the car. He rubbed his eyes, his voice raspy. "Julian, where am I?" Before he could finish, the memories from the safe room arrived, late but vivid, like a red-hot metal wire, thin and precise, suddenly jabbing him somewhere deep, releasing a burst of white-hot, shameful steam. The burning pain on the back of his neck, his curling toes, the iron-hard arm that had held him, the rise and fall of a muscular chest, the stream of sweet, audacious endearments. "Baby, sweetheart," Leo whispered against his ear, and the raw, suffocating emotion in those eyes. It was so direct, so primal it was almost terrifying, like a rabid beast about to devour him whole. An alpha in their susceptible period was really like that. He couldn't breathe. His chest felt as if it were still being squeezed by that powerful arm. His face flushed a deep red. He scrambled away, crashing into the bed rail, dodging the hand with the warm towel. He was as frantic as a maiden fending off a rogue. If it weren't for the rail, he would have rolled right onto the floor. Julian's hand froze mid-air, as if a wound had been suddenly aggravated. He was stunned. There was indeed a wound on his palm. The bandage was gone, but 4 dark red scabs remained. Leo caught sight of them and immediately looked away, as if burned. Julian withdrew his hand and tossed the towel aside, a clear signal that he wouldn't touch him. His voice was very low. "I'm sorry." The apology was sincere. He truly hadn't intended to mark Leo that night. He had had improper thoughts, wanted to steal a taste of honey, but that was all. Otherwise, he wouldn't have struggled so hard to restrain himself at the beginning. If Leo hadn't come looking for him, hadn't insisted on sticking his little neck right under those drooling, sharp teeth. "I didn't mean to give you a temporary mark," Julian said, his gaze fixed on Leo. He wasn't playing the victim, not shifting blame, not leveraging his actions for gratitude. The agonizing pain of an A+ susceptible period, Leo's own recklessness in walking into the trap, the weeks of meticulous care he had provided. He didn't mention any of it. "I lost control. I'm sorry." He apologized only for his own failure. Like a drowning man clinging to a piece of driftwood, Leo gripped the metal bed rail, watching him warily from the corner of his eye. Julian, here to care for him at the hospital, was dressed down. A few strands of dark hair fell across his strong brow. His casual shirt was unbuttoned at the top, without a tie. He looked younger, no longer the uncle figure Leo was used to. His collarbones were straight, disappearing into the collar of his shirt. The fog-blue fabric was stretched taut over the muscles beneath. He looked elegant, sensual. A roaring filled Leo's ears as blood rushed to them. The proper attire, the calm expression, the sincere tone. But Leo turned his face away, feeling as unsettled as if he had just read a dirty book. "Leo," Julian said softly, "I am truly sorry." Leo's throat moved as he swallowed. He mumbled that he didn't blame him. He had burst into the basement during Julian's susceptible period. His intentions were good, but given the outcome, he couldn't say he was entirely blameless. Any other A+ alpha in that situation that night would not have stopped at just a temporary mark. There was nothing more to say. He didn't blame anyone. I mean it,